Donnell sat in the small room, the weight of Mr. Davis's words pressing down on him. The idea of disappearing felt like a dream, a way to escape the nightmare that had become his reality. But the thought of leaving his mother, his friends, and everything he knew behind made his stomach twist in knots. "Donnell," Mr. Davis said, breaking the silence. "You need to understand the stakes here. Your father's past is dangerous, and they will stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. If you stay, they'll come for you." Donnell took a deep breath, trying to process everything. "But I don't want to run. I want to fight. I want to clear my name." Mr. Davis leaned back, studying him. "Fighting is noble, but you must be smart about it. If you stay, you'll need a plan. You'll have to gather evidence to prove your innocence, but that won't be easy. It's going to be a battle against powerful people." Donnell felt torn. He wanted to prove that he was innocent, to show the world that he was not his father's mistakes. But he also knew that his life was on the line. He could feel the tension in the air, like a storm about to break. "I need time to think," Donnell finally said, his voice steady. "Can you give me a few days?" Mr. Davis nodded. "I can stall for a bit, but the pressure is mounting. Just know that whatever you choose, I'm here to help you." As Donnell returned to his cell, his mind swirled with conflicting thoughts. He knew he had to make a choice, but the weight of it felt almost unbearable. How could he decide between staying and fighting for his life or disappearing into the shadows? Over the next few days, Donnell spent his time in the library at the police station, sifting through old newspaper articles and public records that might give him clues about his father's past. He hoped to find something, anything, that could help him understand what was going on. The more he read, the more he uncovered stories of power struggles, betrayals, and a secret organization that had operated in the shadows for decades. There were whispers of people disappearing and rumors of dangerous deals being made. Donnell's heart raced as he realized how deep his father had been involved. This wasn't just a simple misunderstanding, it was a web of deception that could ensnare him at any moment. One article caught his eye. It spoke of a man who had once been close to his father, someone who had tried to expose the organization's secrets but had vanished without a trace. Donnell felt a chill run down his spine. This man could have information that could help him, but finding him wouldn't be easy. Determined, Donnell decided he needed to learn more about this man. If he could track down any of his father's former associates or anyone who might know the truth, he could start piecing together his own story. One evening, Donnell was back in his cell, his mind racing with possibilities. Suddenly, he heard a knock on the bars. It was a fellow inmate named Marcus, a wiry man with sharp eyes and a quick wit. "Hey, Donnell," Marcus said casually, leaning against the bars. "I heard you've got some trouble brewing. Mind if I sit?" Donnell hesitated but nodded. "Sure, I guess." As Marcus entered the cell, Donnell could sense a sharp intelligence behind his relaxed demeanor. "I know a thing or two about your situation," Marcus said, his tone lowering. "Word travels fast in here." Donnell raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I've been listening. You're not just some random guy in here. You've got ties to something big, your father and his secrets," Marcus replied, leaning in closer. "If you want to get out of this mess, you need allies." Donnell felt a flicker of hope. "Do you know anything about my father's past?" Marcus nodded slowly. "I've heard whispers. I know about the organization he was part of. They don't take kindly to anyone snooping around." Donnell's pulse quickened. "Can you help me? I need to find out more about what he was involved in and why they want me." Marcus considered this for a moment. "I might know someone who could help. But it's risky, and you need to be careful. If they find out you're looking into this, you could be in serious trouble." "I'm already in trouble," Donnell replied firmly. "I can't just sit here and wait for things to get worse. I need to know the truth." Marcus smiled, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "All right then. Let's make a plan. I'll reach out to some contacts I have on the outside. If we're going to dig up the past, we'll need all the help we can get." With Marcus's help, Donnell felt a surge of determination. They spent their days plotting and gathering information using the limited resources available to them in the station's library. Marcus had a knack for finding connections. He knew people who had access to public records, and they began to compile everything they could about Isaac Johnson. Donnell was amazed at how quickly things started to come together. As the days turned into a week, they found articles and documents that painted a clearer picture of his father's life. Donnell learned that Isaac had been part of a secret organization known for its influence over businesses and politics. They had their hands in everything, from real estate to law enforcement. One name kept coming up in their research: Gerald Thorne, a businessman with a reputation for ruthlessness. Thorne had been a close ally of Isaac's, but their partnership had ended in a bitter fallout that had left both men on opposite sides of a dangerous game. Gerald Thorne could be our ticket to finding out the truth, Marcus said one day, slamming a newspaper article on the table. If anyone knows what happened to your father, it's him. But how do we get to him? Donnell asked, frustration creeping in. He's not just going to talk to us. Leave that to me, Marcus said with a smirk. I have some contacts on the outside who can set something up. If we can find a way to get to Thorne, we might learn what he knows about your father and the organization. Donnell nodded, hope igniting within him. He was finally taking steps to uncover the truth about his father's past and, hopefully, clear his own name. As the plan took shape, Donnell's nerves began to settle. With Marcus as his ally, he felt less alone in his fight. They kept their heads down, focusing on the information they could gather while avoiding the attention of the guards. Days passed, and Donnell began to feel a sense of urgency. He knew he didn't have much time. The longer he stayed in jail, the more dangerous things became. He had to act before the police could solidify their case against him. Finally, the day arrived when Marcus got a call from one of his contacts. We've set up a meeting with Gerald Thorne, he said, his voice brimming with excitement. But it's going to be risky. You need to be careful. Donnell's heart raced. When is it? Tonight. We'll have to do it in secret. You'll have to keep your head low and stay out of sight until we can find a way to get you out of here. Donnell felt a mix of fear and anticipation. He had to keep his cool, but the thought of finally getting answers about his father's past thrilled him. That night, Donnell felt a restless energy as he waited for Marcus to return. The hours dragged on, each tick of the clock reminding him that the window for action was closing. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and Marcus slipped in, a determined look on his face. It's time, he said. Let's go. Donnell followed Marcus through the dark, winding halls of the police station, his heart pounding. They crept down the back corridors, avoiding guards and security cameras as they made their way toward the exit. Outside, the night was cool and quiet, the moonlight casting eerie shadows on the ground. Marcus led Donnell to a nearby alley where a car was waiting. Inside was a man with a serious expression, his eyes sharp and watchful. This is Eddie, Marcus introduced. He'll take us to the meeting. As they drove through the city, Donnell's mind raced. What would he say to Thorne? Would he be willing to share what he knew about Isaac? The car pulled up to a dimly lit diner on the outskirts of town. This is the place, Eddie said, glancing around. Stay close to me and don't attract attention. Donnell and Marcus stepped out of the car, their nerves buzzing as they entered the diner. The smell of coffee and fried food hung in the air, mixing with the low hum of conversation. They spotted a booth in the back, and sitting there was Gerald Thorne, a man in his 50s with a slicked-back hairstyle and an air of authority. His piercing gaze met Donnell's. Donnell felt a chill run down his spine as he approached the booth. Thorne exuded power, and there was an intensity in his eyes that made Donnell acutely aware of the stakes. Mr. Thorne, Marcus said, sliding into the booth across from him. Donnell followed suit, forcing himself to maintain eye contact with the man who could hold the keys to his father's past. Marcus, Thorne acknowledged, nodding slightly before his gaze shifted to Donnell. And you must be Donnell. Isaac's son. Donnell swallowed hard. Yes, I am. I need to talk to you about my father. Thorne leaned back, steepling his fingers. Your father was a complicated man. He had ambitions that led him down a dark path. What do you want to know? I want to know what happened to him, Donnell said, trying to keep his voice steady. Why did he leave? What was he involved in? Thorne studied Donnell for a long moment. Your father was caught in a web of power plays, Donnell. He was a man who wanted to protect you, but he also wanted to rise to the top. That ambition put him at odds with some very dangerous people. Like the organization you were part of? Donnell pressed, his heart racing. What was your relationship with him? Thorne's expression hardened. Isaac was a rising star. He had potential, but he was also naive. He thought he could navigate the shadows without getting burned. When he tried to cut ties, they didn't take it lightly. Donnell's mind raced. What do you mean? Who are they? Those who deal in secrets, Thorne replied cryptically. When Isaac tried to leave, they wanted to make sure he didn't take any information with him. He put himself and you at risk. Donnell felt a lump form in his throat. So you're saying my father's death was because of his choices? He was trying to protect me? Exactly, Thorne said, leaning forward. But there's more. There's something he left behind, something they don't want you to find. If you dig deep enough, you might uncover it. But be careful. They'll be watching. Donnell's heart raced at the possibility of uncovering a hidden truth. Where do I start? Thorne slid a small piece of paper across the table. This is an address. It's a place your father used to frequent. If you can find the right people there, they might lead you to what you seek. But tread carefully, Donnell. They won't take kindly to questions. As Donnell pocketed the paper, he glanced at Marcus, who gave him an encouraging nod. Thank you, Mr. Thorne, Donnell said, trying to keep his voice steady. I won't let you down. Just remember, Thorne warned, his voice low. The past is a dangerous thing. If you're not ready for the truth, it might cost you more than you're willing to pay. After the meeting, Donnell and Marcus drove back to the station, adrenaline pumping through their veins. They had information, real information that could lead to the truth about his father. Do you think Thorne was telling the truth? Donnell asked, his mind racing with possibilities. Who knows? Marcus replied. But it's our best lead. If your father left something behind, we have to find it before anyone else does. As they planned their next steps, Donnell couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The weight of danger pressed down on him, but he pushed it aside. He had to focus on the task at hand. That night, Donnell barely slept, his mind churning with thoughts of what lay ahead. The address Thorne had given him was scribbled in his pocket, and he couldn't wait to investigate. He needed to learn everything he could about his father. The next morning, Donnell and Marcus made their way to the address, a nondescript building on the edge of town. It looked abandoned, but there was a sense of foreboding that sent chills down Donnell's spine. This is it, Marcus said, scanning the area. Stay alert. We have no idea what we're walking into. As they approached the door, Donnell felt a surge of determination. He pushed it open, revealing a dark hallway filled with dust and shadows. They stepped inside, the door creaking ominously behind them. The interior of the building was eerily quiet. Donnell and Marcus moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and neglect, and Donnell couldn't shake the feeling that they were intruding on something sacred. Look for anything that seems out of place, Marcus whispered, his eyes scanning the room. There could be hidden clues about your father. Donnell nodded, his heart pounding as they moved deeper into the building. The walls were lined with old photographs and dusty furniture, remnants of a life that once was. As they explored, Donnell spotted a door slightly ajar at the end of the hall. He motioned to Marcus, and they approached it quietly. Donnell pushed the door open, revealing a small office filled with boxes and papers scattered across the floor. Check this out, Marcus said, pulling out a box labeled confidential. They began rifling through the papers, scanning for anything that might be relevant. Suddenly, Donnell's heart skipped a beat as he pulled out a familiar photograph, his father standing with a group of men, all looking serious. It was a picture from the articles he had read, but there was something different about it. This is it! Donnell exclaimed, excitement bubbling inside him. This has to be from the organization he was involved with. Marcus leaned in, examining the photo closely. Do you recognize any of these people? Donnell studied the faces, feeling a connection. No, but I know I need to find out who they are. This could lead us to more answers. Just then, they heard a noise from outside the office, footsteps approaching. Panic surged through Donnell. We need to hide, he hissed, shoving the photograph back into the box. They ducked behind a large filing cabinet just as the door swung open. A tall figure entered, scanning the room with piercing eyes. It was a man in a dark suit, his expression cold and calculating. Donnell held his breath, feeling the adrenaline coursing through him. This man was clearly someone important, someone who had no business being there. As the man stepped further into the office, Donnell could hear his heart pounding in his ears. They had to remain silent, any noise could give them away. The man began sifting through the papers, looking for something. What are we going to do? Marcus whispered, his eyes wide with fear. Donnell glanced around, desperate for an escape. If we stay here, we'll be trapped. We have to find a way out. Just then, the man paused, his eyes narrowing. I know you're here, he called out, his voice low and threatening. You might as well come out. I won't ask again. Donnell's pulse raced. He exchanged a look with Marcus, who nodded in agreement. They had no choice, they had to confront him. Slowly, they stepped out from behind the filing cabinet, hands raised. Who are you? Donnell demanded, trying to sound braver than he felt. The man smirked, crossing his arms. You're a curious one, aren't you? Digging into things you shouldn't. You're just like your father. What do you know about my father? Donnell shot back, trying to maintain his composure. The man stepped closer, his eyes glinting with menace. I know he made enemies. And now, you're treading on dangerous ground. You're in over your head, kid. Donnell felt anger boiling inside him. I'm not afraid of you. I want the truth about my father. The man laughed, a chilling sound that echoed in the small office. Truth? You think you can handle it? You have no idea what you're getting into. Before Donnell could respond, the man lunged at him, but Donnell instinctively dodged to the side. Chaos erupted as Marcus and Donnell scrambled to escape. Run! Marcus yelled, and they dashed toward the exit, adrenaline fueling their flight. They burst through the door and into the hallway, the man's footsteps pounding behind them. Donnell's heart raced as they raced for the back exit, the cool night air beckoning them outside. Keep going, Marcus urged, pushing Donnell ahead. They sprinted toward the alley, their breaths coming in quick gasps. Just as they reached the alley, Donnell glanced back. The man was hot on their trail, his anger palpable. Get in the car! Marcus shouted, diving into the vehicle that Eddie had parked just outside. Donnell followed, slamming the door shut as Eddie revved the engine. Drive! Donnell yelled, his heart pounding in his chest as the man reached the mouth of the alley. Eddie pressed the gas pedal, and the car surged forward, the tires screeching against the asphalt. Donnell glanced back, his heart racing as he saw the man stop at the alley's entrance, watching them with a look of fury etched on his face. Did he see us? Marcus asked, breathless and wide-eyed. I don't know, but we can't stick around to find out, Donnell replied, adrenaline coursing through him. They sped away from the diner, leaving the darkness behind, but the weight of danger lingered in the air. As they drove, Donnell tried to calm his racing heart. We need to figure out what just happened, he said, looking at Marcus. That man knew my father. We're getting closer. Marcus nodded, still catching his breath. We need to regroup and come up with a plan. We can't let this stop us. Eddie glanced in the rearview mirror, his expression tense. You boys need to lay low for a while. This isn't just a simple investigation anymore. It's dangerous. Donnell felt a rush of determination. We're not giving up. I want to find out what happened to my father and why I'm being targeted. They drove in silence, the weight of the encounter heavy on their minds. Finally, Eddie pulled into a secluded spot away from the main roads, parking beneath a flickering streetlight. Let's think this through, Eddie said, turning to face them. What do you know about the man who chased you? He seemed to be part of the organization my father was involved with, Donnell replied. He hinted that I'm just like my father. I need to know what that means. Then we have to dig deeper, Marcus said, his voice steady. But we need to be careful. We can't trust anyone right now. Donnell nodded, feeling the weight of their mission. Let's head back to the station, but we need to be smart about it. We'll find a way to gather more information without raising suspicion.